Have you ever found yourself, maybe, shivering in an office that just feels perpetually too cold? Or, I don't know, struggle to open a jar that seems like it was designed for much, much larger hands? I'm going to brush these off, right? Minor annoyances. But what if I told you they're actually symptoms? Symptoms of a much deeper systemic issue shaping the world around us.
It's a really fascinating question, and it's one that Caroline Criado Perez unpacks with, frankly, meticulous research in her groundbreaking book, Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. And this isn't just, a collection of anecdotes. It's a really rigorously documented deep dive into how this pervasive gender data gap creates a world that's fundamentally biased against women, often with profound, sometimes even life-threatening consequences.
That's exactly what we're exploring today. And for this deep dive, we're actually drawing on a fantastic analytical framework. It's much like the one you'd find from Mindful Moments, which is all about inspiring reflection and rational thought. It really helps us, I think, ensure we're getting into these complex ideas, making them clear, engaging, and always, fostering critical thinking. And Criado Perez's book itself is just a masterclass in this. It combines really extensive statistical analysis with these incredibly compelling case studies that honestly bring the data to life. So at the heart of Invisible Women is this foundational concept she calls the default male. It's this pervasive, often unconscious assumption that, male experiences, male physiology, male behavior patterns, they somehow represent the universal human norm. It's almost like for centuries we've been building our world with a blueprint that only really accounts for half of humanity.
That's such a crucial point. And it's deeply embedded, in our collective history. You can trace its roots all the way back to early evolutionary theories, where narratives like man the hunter sort of dominated, often overlooking women's equally vital roles in, say, gathering, nurturing, community building, that kind of thing. Even today, in modern language, common assumptions. This male is default perspective, it just persists. And the book argues really forcefully, this isn't about deliberate malice or, ill intent. Not usually. It's more a story of centuries of unconscious bias becoming so institutionalized within our systems, our data, that it's now almost invisible to many people.
Right? It's just baked in. And the sheer scope of this problem is, it's truly staggering once you start to see it. Criado Perez brilliantly lays out how these invisible structures are woven into practically every area of our lives. I mean, the book delves into everything from urban planning and daily routines to the workplace, product design, crucial medical research, public life, even how we respond to global crises. It's like she's given us special glasses, to see the hidden biases built into the very fabric of our world.
Yeah, exactly. And what's truly fascinating and, quite frankly, urgent here is how this problem escalates as we move deeper into this era dominated by big data and artificial intelligence. Because if we don't actively address these existing biases in our foundational data sets now, we risk perpetuating them, even amplifying them on a massive automated scale, and that makes them exponentially harder to correct down the line.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe alarming. What truly strikes me about this data gap is how its consequences play out in areas where we least expect them, areas like healthcare, where the impact can literally be life and death.
Precisely. Part 4 of the book, which is provocatively titled Going to the Doctor, is particularly alarming. It meticulously details how women have been systematically excluded from clinical trials for decades. Now, sure, there were historical concerns about pregnancy risks, especially after tragedies like thalidomide. But this evolved into something broader, a systematic discrimination, really. Female physiology, with its hormonal cycles and, perceived complexity, was often just dismissed as too confounding for research, too messy. So this led to the male body being treated as the default standard in medical education, drug dosages, even in how symptoms are expected to present. And the shocking result is that symptoms unique to women, or even common symptoms that just present differently in women, are frequently overlooked or dismissed as atypical.
Wow. This isn't just about abstract statistics, is it? It's about real people suffering. Criado Perez shares this incredibly powerful anecdote, Michelle's medical odyssey. Can you imagine? A 12-year struggle to get a diagnosis for urgent, painful, often bloody bowel symptoms. Multiple male doctors just repeatedly dismissed her concerns. They often asked only if she might be pregnant and then just advised her to, take aspirin and rest. Just like that. It wasn't until she was finally referred to a female general practitioner that her condition was properly diagnosed. A diseased colon. And that delay in treatment, which was directly due to this consistent dismissal, significantly increased Michelle's risk of colon cancer, that individual suffering, for over a decade. just because her experience didn't fit the default understanding.
Exactly. And what stands out so powerfully there is how Michelle's personal suffering connects directly to this broader systemic issue. Her story perfectly exemplifies how individual women bear the brunt of this male default medical training and research. It's not an isolated case, unfortunately. The data shows women are, for instance, 50% more likely to be misdiagnosed following heart attacks. 50%. Why? Because their symptoms, often less dramatic chest pain, maybe more fatigue or nausea, they just don't match the male textbook presentations we've all been taught. So yeah, the gender data gap in medicine truly has fatal consequences. It's a clear call for a major shift in how medical research and practice are conducted.
It's sobering. So if these biases are so prevalent in life-saving areas like healthcare, what does this mean for the things we interact with every single day? Beyond medicine, the book dives into daily life and design, right? Powerfully illustrating the impact of this one-size-fits-men approach.
Oh, absolutely. It's astonishing how pervasive these design assumptions are. Think about your office temperature, for example. Criado Perez reveals that most office air conditioning settings are still based on the metabolic rate of a 1960s 40-year-old 154-pound man.
Still, really?
Still. So if you're shivering at your desk, it's probably not just you, it's the standard. Or take car safety systems. They're primarily designed and tested using male crash test dummies. The result: women are 47% more likely to be seriously injured and 17% more likely to die in car crashes, simply because the safety features aren't optimized for their average height, weight, or, body composition.
That 154-pound man from the 60s must have been perpetually warm. It really makes you rethink every time you reach for a cardigan at work, doesn't it? It's not just about comfort, it's actually impacting productivity focus.
Yeah.
And this isn't just limited to offices and cars, I assume.
Not at all. It extends to countless everyday objects. Smartphones, for instance, often designed for larger hands, making them genuinely difficult for many women to use comfortably with just one hand. Even things like voice recognition software have historically struggled more with female voices. Why? Because the training data was overwhelmingly male.
Right, the input data shapes the output.
Precisely. Criado Perez identifies these three fundamental themes that kind of underpin these pervasive design flaws. First, the systematic failure to account for female biology and physiology. That leads to everything from unsafe products to misdiagnosed illnesses. Second, the invisibility of unpaid care work, which completely distorts our economic understanding and policy priorities. We'll probably get into that more. And third, the pervasive issue of male violence against women, which impacts everything from public safety to how we design urban spaces. These themes just keep resurfacing, showing how deeply ingrained these biases are and how they affect women's lives globally every single day.
Okay, let's move to the economic side then. Because the book reveals yet another layer of invisibility, the workplace and this massive, often unacknowledged, burden of unpaid care work. It introduces a really critical concept, the unencumbered worker model. This is this ideal, right? Often an unconscious assumption baked into our workplaces that employees have no caregiving responsibilities, or if they do, those responsibilities somehow magically don't interfere with their work lives.
Yeah.
And this ideal it doesn't reflect the reality for most women, does it? Fundamentally disadvantaging them in the professional sphere.
It's a profound insight, absolutely. I mean, the numbers are staggering. Women globally perform something like 75% of all unpaid care work. 75%. And that covers everything. Raising children, caring for elderly relatives, managing households, cooking, cleaning, all that invisible labor that literally keeps societies functioning. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the economic value of this invisible labor is huge, conservatively estimated to be between 10% and even up to 50% of a country's GDP in some cases.
Wow, up to 50%.
Yeah, depending on the country and how you measure it. Yet, because it's largely excluded from official calculations from GDP statistics, it completely distorts economic policy. We don't invest enough in things like childcare, elder care, or truly flexible work arrangements because the true cost and value of this labor is basically hidden from view. And this systematically perpetuates the disadvantage women face in their careers, their financial lives, their overall well-being. It shapes women's lives dramatically, but policymakers often they don't see it in the data they use.
Right. So given how these invisible biases shape our present, it raises an even more urgent question, doesn't it? What happens when we feed all this biased data into the algorithms that are shaping our future?
Well, that's where the problem becomes potentially exponentially more critical. Because artificial intelligence systems, they're trained on vast amounts of historical data. So, if that historical data already contains a gender data gap, if it reflects a world designed primarily for men with women's experiences underrepresented or miscategorized, then the AI will inevitably learn, perpetuate, and even amplify those existing inequalities.
Making it worse.
Potentially much worse. And what's particularly tricky is that many algorithms operate as black boxes, meaning their internal decision-making process isn't transparent or easily understood, so these biases can become even harder to identify and correct once they're embedded in the code. We could literally be automating inequality on an unprecedented scale, making solutions increasingly complex and elusive.
So when you boil it down, invisible women isn't just about presenting statistics, is it? It's really about making visible the profound, often hidden impact of these data gaps on real lives. The overarching message seems crystal clear. Achieving genuine equality requires systematic attention to whose experiences are included, or perhaps more often excluded, in the fundamental data that shapes our world.
Absolutely. And the book isn't just a critique, it actually offers a compelling roadmap for change. There are things we can do. We need to demand sex disaggregated data. That just means data that is broken down by sex in all research, policy development, design processes. It sounds simple, but it's crucial because it allows us to actually see how issues impact men and women differently, revealing biases that are currently hidden.
Making the invisible visible.
Exactly. We also need to advocate for inclusive design standards that explicitly account for diverse body types, different use patterns. Ensuring women are present and actually heard in decision-making roles is also vital because lived experience profoundly shapes perspective. You need those voices in the room. And finally, we absolutely must recognize, quantify, and integrate the economic value of unpaid care work into our national accounts, into our GDP calculations, to create truly equitable systems and policies.
It really makes you think. So for everyone listening, what stands out to you from all this? Maybe consider how the objects you use every day, the policies that govern your community, or even the news you consume. How might they be shaped by these default male assumptions that maybe you never even noticed before? How might looking for those invisible details change your perspective?
Yeah.
And perhaps, inspire you to start asking more questions. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to the show for more explorations of profound ideas.
Yes, subscribe.
Share this episode with your friends, family, anyone who you think might find it interesting.